Hello and welcome to Reiki Women Podcasts. It's Bronwen Logan here from Reiki with Bronwen, and I have my two colleagues. We have Carrie Varela there from the Reiki Healing Society and Michaela Daystar from Heartscapes Reiki. So we're all here today to move into the festive, that's what this is about, festive feeling of Christmas or whatever it is that you might be doing over this holiday. And our subject that we thought we'd talk about, which would be appropriate to that, is about Reiki and being with family. So being in a family environment and how that works for you. Does that trigger things for you? I have a thing here that I love that Pema Chodron, Buddhist nun, says, and she says that family, they blow your cover. So that means that they see you for who you really are. You can't pretend, and they will probably blow you apart at the same time because you might become a bit reactive to old experiences that you have had with family in the past. And so when everyone comes together, it can be delightful, but it can also be a bit of a brewing pot for issues to arise. So it can be a bit of everything. And we thought we'd talk today about how the system of Reiki might be able to support you in that environment and help you have a fabulous festive time. Anyone like to go first on this subject?
I can jump in there, maybe just like with a little bit of like contexting and setting the scene, because I feel like this, I mean, so many of the topics we talk about, but this one in particular, and maybe because it's so alive in this time of year, feels like there's a lot of different directions that we could hold it. And so just, kind of naming what came up for me when contemplating this connection between our Reiki practice and our experiences with our family, particularly in times of the year, whether it's through the holidays or through things happening internally in families where we're maybe spending more time with family than we're used to, or perhaps not getting to spend time with family for reasons that are challenging. And so, yeah, there's a lot there. So the directions that kind of came up in my mind, firstly, how the system of Reiki, how our practice can support us in kind of the things I just named, the potentially overwhelming, potentially overstimulating, in a wide variety of ways, experience of being with a lot of family for a concentrated period of time. And that overwhelm and that challenge can be true whether we're having positive or negative, or probably a combination of the both experiences. The other side of that is looking at the particular experiences that are going to be different for everyone around whether or not our family understands or accepts our Reiki practice. This can be, this is one of those things that is true of any identity that is important to us, whether that is our sexuality or our gender identity or our job or our relationship choices that we've made or our choices around spirituality. Our family, the people closest to us, might accept those parts of ourselves and be on board and be supportive and maybe be really into them, or even if they don't understand them, at least be supportive, or they might not. Right? We might have quite the opposite of experience where something that's really important to us, that's our identity, that's something that's really connected to who we are, is just not understood or accepted by our family. And in any of those respects, the system of Reiki can be our ally. And in that last example, the system of Reiki might be the thing that is not accepted or understood by our family. And so I think I just really wanted to start by acknowledging that for our listeners, perhaps even for this panel, we're going to have a wide range of experiences around those things. And for those of us who have experienced a lack of acceptance or understanding from our family related to our Reiki practice, there can be a lot of pain and difficulty there. Conversely, for those of us who have experienced acceptance by anybody in our life that's important, not just family, that can be a source of tremendous support and buoying and inspiration. And I think, where I really am landing at the starting point is that all of us deserve that level of acceptance around our spiritual choices and our practices and the things that make us who we are. And if you are not experiencing that in your family of origin, then there are ways to expand your family in ways that bring more acceptance. So it was just on my heart to begin with there, to just name that dynamic, almost the kind of elephant in the room dynamic when we talk about family and our identities. So I think I'm going to just leave it there as an open door, and hold opinions for responses to what you beautiful ladies have to bring to the conversation, and beautiful kitten has to bring to the conversation.
Yes. Well, I love that personally. I just think it's such a good way to start that conversation. And I agree that, Reiki can really help us unpack challenging family dynamics, but it might also just be Reiki. That is kind of the elephant in the room in family dynamics that, can be a sore thumb, for ourselves, feeling accepted and welcome to be who we are, to explore the things that bring us more meaning and purpose in life. And some people, including our family members, sometimes don't understand that, and that's really hard. And it definitely have been there myself. Like, I think when I first started my Reiki journey, my family really didn't understand what was going on for me and why. And so happened that I was also going through a divorce while I was in the midst of all of that. And it left me with very, very raw feelings, vulnerable feelings about being around my family at all. And although my family is incredibly supportive, and I feel super grateful to have a family that is so supportive, there were some family gatherings, some Christmases that were incredibly raw, really hard on me, emotionally vulnerable and kind of chaotic. And honestly, the main thing that got me through that, and the main thing I would bottom line encourage anybody with that kind of family dynamic going on this year for them, is Reiki. Keep calm and Reiki on. I just would Reiki myself and give myself a lot of hands-on healing. Spend a lot of time doing Reiki before any sort of family event. And I still do that today. So I no longer live near my family, and I have to travel to see my family over the holidays. And this year I chose not to travel to see them, and spend time more with my immediate family here. And, that's been a good decision, although I feel my heart tugged in a lot of different directions. But even when I return back to see my family now, I notice that there tends to be a little bit of a buildup of emotional stuff that's there. Volatile dynamics, let's say. And, Reiki is still the thing that is really soothing for me. And I feel like just energetically kind of prepares me for, situations, circumstances that could, go either way. Who knows? It might be a really lovely time with family. There might also be triggers and things that arrive. So either way, I feel like just more open, grounded, aware of my true self, centered in my own being. And then I can enjoy my family, and not get too hung up on the things that bother me about, others, or just, that are triggering or whatever. And I have to say that Reiki has also given me a little bit more freedom, energetic support, let's say, to help me really not invest in relationships where I don't feel seen, I don't feel accepted, I don't feel accepted for the identities, like you said, that we take on. And, for me, that the real work of that has been in my most intimate relationships with my partners. And, I've been in a few relationships, and unfortunately not all of them have worked out, but it's kind of one of the central themes of that is not feeling accepted by that person to be who I really am, to explore different aspects of the things that make me, that light me up, that bring me more joy and purpose in my life. And one in particular, I was in this relationship with a person who's lovely. And even now I still have so much love in my heart for him, but never accepted me and spirituality because he was an atheist. And so we always kind of had this kind of conflict there, and we really could never meet minds. And yeah, so it was really this path of Reiki helped me accept him for who he was, but also let our relationship go, because without that common connection, it had become such a source of incongruity in our relationship that really, I think, our deep love and connection and respect for each other couldn't grow. So, and I've had friends like that too, so I don't mean to ramble on and on, but I have that friend. I mean, maybe we all have that friend who just loves to make fun of you. And I mean, I think it's good, it keeps us humble, whatever. But every single time I go out to dinner with her or anything, it's just always brings up this embarrassing story. And it's like time to embarrass Carrie over something. And I try not to take it too personally, because I feel like in some senses that's her personality, or that's, maybe some misguided way that she's trying to get love and attention and whatever. But so I still love and appreciate this person, but I also kind of keep my boundaries with her, and don't invest a whole lot of time, because it's just kind of a drag to be around somebody who wants to put you down. Yeah, like, it's so important to be around people who lift you up and inspire you, allow you to be who you are, the messy parts, the complicated parts, the spiritual parts, the enlightened parts, all of those things. So unfortunately, we can't always find that in our families, but I'd love to pass the baton on to somebody else. I feel like I'm right.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a very small family, so I guess, I think of old friends as family in a sense as well. And it's a funny thing coming together with people and talking about, I don't feel like I've ever had my practice as a problem, not in my experience, but I have seen it with other people, as students I've seen it with, where someone will come to a class and they're like, oh, when I go home, I'm going to have to pretend I didn't do this, or I will be laughed at, or whatever, those sorts of things, as you were saying, Carrie. So I've definitely seen that experience, but luckily I think I'm not also someone, I don't go around espousing the system of Reiki to everybody, in that sense too. So I keep it more as my thing that I do. It's to do with me. I think if someone wants a Reiki treatment or something like that in my friends or family, well, for example, I had a friend recently who's had cancer and had treatment for it throughout the whole year. And, I said to her from the beginning, look, if you want a Reiki treatment or anything like that, just let me know. And then she's like, yeah, not at the moment, but, I think when all of this is done, I might want to do that, so I will sort of suggest to people, but I certainly wouldn't then keep trying to put it on to people. And people know what I do, and if they're interested, I sort of expect them, I guess, to ask me if they're interested in something, or how it works, or whether it might help them with something that they're going through. It's not really something that I guess that I put out there, which is probably why I don't have so much of an issue. I think, some people like to talk about of what they do. My partner, he doesn't do any Reiki practices or anything like that. And, but he's totally respectful of what I do. Oh, I will do Reiki on him, for example, but I don't feel the need to turn that into like a missionary zeal to transform the world into Reiki practitioners, even though, what was our last episode? Reiki can heal the world. So I do, I do think it would be great if everyone was, but I certainly think that everybody will come to something in their own time, in their own place, in their own way. And it's not up to me to do that. And I do sincerely think that the more awareness that I have about myself, then the more sensitive and empathetic that I am to other people and what they're going through and how I can relate to them. So the system of Reiki really helps, I think, from that perspective for me, which is sort of what you guys have probably been saying too. And then, it's just that thing of trying to have a better, a wider consciousness of what it means to be in a relationship with other people, to communicate with other people. There's practices like Tonglen, which we've spoken about before, not a Reiki practice, but a Buddhist practice that I find is helpful. And that is where we bring our awareness to the pain of others, what their pains are. Because sometimes we forget, and especially when we're with family, that thing that we forget that yes, we've had pain, but everybody's had pain, and we all have our experiences that get us to the point where we are today. And this point is only this point right now. It's constantly changing, shifting. So whatever is going on for the people around you that you are in a close environment with, whether it be family or friends, that to be aware that other people might be experiencing there are a wide variety of things that they might be experiencing, especially at Christmas, because there are these expectations that we're meant to be happy families. We're meant to be all loving, caring, and yet sometimes, not everyone feels that way. And so the more awareness that we bring to our experience of who we are helps us to also have a broader sense of what's going on around us. And as I said before, be more sensitive towards that. I don't know. What do you have to say about any of that?
Yeah, there's so much here, and it feels like, I love this point that you're bringing about, not that for you, you're not like proselytizing about Reiki, right? And that you're not holding this as something that has to be, pushed on anybody else, or that, but it's something that's about who you are. So I would imagine that if that it comes up in conversation, but it's not something that you're feeling like you have to center everything on. And the practicing Reiki from its Japanese origins is really helps with that, right? Because it's so much about that self-reflection, that going internally, and then focusing on connection and compassion in terms of how we're relating to other people, less so than what we are, doing to them, or something that we have to fix or change or heal for them. And, the piece around whether are the people closest to us, want Reiki sessions from us, that can be a point of difficulty or contention if the people close to us don't want that from us. But if we can hold the perspective that it's not about whether they get on a table and have a hands-on, Tenehiro practice, it's about how are we in our interaction with them? How do we show up? How do we be when we're in relationship and in proximity to other people? And what effect does that have on them, whether or not the word Reiki ever leaves our lips? Similarly, practicing with the precepts, of course, we always spiral around and back to the precepts because that is the foundation of this practice, can really, really help with some of these dynamics, because we can hold the complexity of having compassionate connection with the people in our family, or the people that are in our community, the people from our places of origin, and we can hold boundaries at the same time. We can love them and honor our connection and be compassionate, as you were saying, for whatever might be true for them in their life, whatever limitations or challenges might be true for them. And at the same time, we can hold that at that level of ultimate reality, that hara to hara connection, that true self connection. That might be different than how we hold that connection in our day-to-day interactions. And those day-to-day interactions might include, setting some boundaries on the amount of time we spend with folks, or the subjects that we talk about, or what we accept, in terms of treatment from people. And we can set those boundaries again with compassion. This is one of those really challenging, but really fundamental, like, not just lessons, but practices, ways of being, ways of integrating Reiki into our life, that can have such an impact on our life, is being able to be true to ourselves, be true to our way and our being in terms of what we need and what we don't need in our life, what we want, to move towards, and what we want to move away from us in our life, but to deliver that communication with compassion. To hold regard and respect for that person, right? Their self, even if we are having to, set a really clear boundary with them. Or perhaps just set a boundary with ourselves, right? That we can be in community, we can be in loving, joyful connection around a holiday or around a family gathering. And we can choose. This might or might not be right for us, right, in a given moment, but it might be right for us to just kind of hold more tender and more quiet those parts of ourselves that aren't understood by those other people. Just to let that be private, right? And to just be in our own, expanding of our true self, without having to be overt about it. There's a lot of different strategies, of course, for being with challenging family interactions. And that can include saying no to the interaction, right? I'm not going to be there, right? But again, delivering that with compassion. I was speaking with a colleague recently, and she had to set some pretty hard boundaries with family for quite some time, had not seen certain people for a very long time, and had chosen to reconnect and to spend Thanksgiving with them. And she said it was amazing, the difference, the positive difference in their interactions that came from her consistent practice of setting compassionate boundaries with them, right? Of being clear about what she was not going to accept in her life, but communicating that in a loving way, doing that over time, and then reconnecting, right? Created a different type of soil, right? A different type of fertility in the soil of these relationships that was very clear to her when they reconnected. It's not necessarily always possible, right? It just depends on the people involved, but that really stood out to me as a powerful example. The other piece that is still kind of on my mind, and this might end up being a separate topic for us, is, okay, say we're not necessarily, we're wanting to share about our Reiki practice, or the people are curious about it, but there is a disconnection around whether the other people understand or accept the practice. So there's strategies for how we talk about Reiki. And we've talked about this before, right? How do we talk about Reiki with other people? In this case, how do we talk to people very close to us who might have views or worldviews or spiritual practices or non-spiritual practices that bring a little bit of tension to the topic? And again, I think practicing from the grounded simplicity of its origins really helps us in that, because it is such a simple and grounded practice, right? And it is centered on things that are probably, as well as anything can be, universal: compassion, connection, love, honoring ourselves, being grateful, being aware and connected to nature, to the world around us, right? These fundamental principles that, a lot of really interesting, esoteric, sometimes wild things are built on, right? Practices that can get quite out there, that can stimulate experiences that are quite wild. But the foundation is something that we can talk about with most people, right? Because who's going to argue with, oh, what is that Reiki thing that you do? Oh, it's a practice of experiencing and expressing more compassion in the world. Period. It doesn't have to go any further than that, right? And we can have a little bit of connection with somebody who maybe would otherwise reject it. Those conversations might have to get more complex if the person really has a fundamental challenge, certain, as you said, Carrie, your friend who's an atheist, who they perhaps are identifying Reiki as a theistic experience, might have a real aversion to that. On the other side of things, people coming from a really strong, particular forms of Judeo-Christian tradition can have a really strong aversion to a practice like Reiki. And so finding the language that's going to be connecting with them, that's going to describe Reiki in terms that have a connection to what matters to them and what they believe, while still staying firm in what matters to us and what's true for us about the system, can be so connecting and so helpful. My father, for example, well, both of my parents are agnostic, atheist, and my dad and stepmom in particular identify very strongly as atheist, but not, I've discovered, non-spiritual. My stepmother probably is non-spiritual. But she's also coming from a lot of religious trauma in her childhood. So for her, anything that is in the territory of religion or spirituality is just a no, right? It's just a no. And that means that I can't talk to her about my work and my practice pretty much at all. Like, pretty much she does not want to hear about it. She doesn't reject me for it, but it's not a point that we can connect around. It's a major part of my life that's just not available to my relationship with her. And that makes me sad. Like, I have sadness about that. Sometimes when I'm in a not great place, I can feel offended by that. Why doesn't she ask me about my work? Why doesn't she want to know about this thing that's so important to me? But rooting back into that compassion and that understanding, as you were talking about, Bronwen, of what a person might be going through. Like, I know the origins of why she doesn't want to hear about it, right? And I respect that, and I love her anyway. My dad, on the other hand, has his own version of spirituality. It's just not theistic specifically. And so we can have really robust conversations about Reiki, and even the parts of it that come through Buddhism that has a certain, emphasis on gods and goddesses and deities and those sorts of things that would be outside of his belief system. In a lot of ways, they're outside of my belief system as well. And so we can really center around the, again, essential elements that have a certain universality to them that, can take us in a lot of different directions. And we've had some really great conversations. But until I had the courage to ask him about his spirituality, because my assumption was, you're an atheist, you don't want to know about any of this stuff, right? None of this is, interesting to you because you're an atheist. That was a limitation on my understanding of his spiritual identity. Come to find out, he has a very deep spiritual identity. It just is not theistic, not focused on deities and gods. So, practicing Reiki can help us, again, with that connection, with building that curiosity, maybe with having the courage to ask some of these questions. It's embarrassing to me how recently it was that it occurred to me to just ask my dad what his spiritual beliefs actually are, right? Like, within the last 5 years, we started having these conversations. And so, that conversation around the dinner table maybe can be taken in some interesting ways if we can have the courage to ask some of these questions, find the language that's connecting with what other folks, what matters to them, and, give it a try while still honoring what matters to us.
I love all of that. One of the things that I keep thinking about is something I've learned along the way is that our emotions, our emotional body really can't separate from things that have happened or things that we project to happen. And so one of the things that I feel like Reiki's really helped me do is that I'm not projecting a certain emotional experience before that event happens. Like, I try to take each opportunity or each moment with my family as it is, and not think about what could happen or what if somebody said this to me, or how, some of those emotional triggers that might be there. Sometimes we're like actually living in this place of emotional triggers that of things that we think might happen, but actually haven't ever happened. I hope that makes sense. But I know that sometimes that can be really hard to separate from that. And our emotional body isn't able to separate from something we might be feeling is happening to us, as opposed to something that really we have been through and lived through. And so, if we have an emotionally volatile or triggering situation in front of us, it's important to remember to kind of address those triggers head on prior to it. So in your meditative or Reiki practice is to really try to identify what those triggers might be and work through them, breathe into them, feel into those, do some emotional processing and releasing, but to also ground ourselves back in reality of what's really happening, right, in those family dynamics. And, our reality is what we think it is, right? So sometimes when we're working with other people, is we have this projection of what people think of us. And it's not always true. It's not always what we think it is. And I don't deal with that as much in my family life, but definitely with my friends too. So sometimes in just social media in general, I'm like, what do these people think of me? And honestly, that's none of my opinion, none of my business, knowing what other people think of me. But nevertheless, it's one of those hangups that I can get hung up on in my own process at times. But And back to just giving and providing Reiki to others, I think after taking a Reiki 1 or 2 training, oftentimes, there's a desire to share Reiki with other people. And usually our starting point really has to be friends and family. And so I think it is important to be able to express, that you're interested and open for people in your family and friend circle to come to you and to experience Reiki, and have, some good ways of describing it to them in a way that they can listen and appreciate it as much as you do. But also, I think it's really important to remember that we're not here necessarily to heal our family. And so I know that my family, actually, I've been thinking about it over the course of the last 15 years or so. I've probably given a Reiki session to almost everybody in my family, like my immediate family, like my parents and siblings, and even some of their spouses and stuff like that. And that's always been really special, but they're not regular routine clients. And I think some of it is just a curiosity, wanting to know me, wanting to support me. But I don't feel that my role within my family is to heal them. And that can be really hard, because a lot of times, when our family is suffering or hurting, we want to help. And I get a lot of help and support from my family, and what they say to me, their words of encouragement and even prayers and stuff like that, that really uplifts me. It makes, it's something that's really supportive for me. And I try to be that for my family members to the extent that they're open to it, but I can't chase them down, to have a Reiki experience or to help them in any way. I really have to wait until they're open. And I think that that's true for anyone. So how are we attracting the right people in our life to come in and identifying who they are too? So sometimes I take time to think about people in my life, and I ask myself what kind of relationship we are, because sometimes, there's a kind of an ambiguity. Like, I've met a lot of moms who are, have children in the same class as my children, and we're somewhat friends, acquaintances, parents together, but many of them also have come to me either to do Reiki or yoga classes. And so I've had to kind of spend time being contemplative of what kind of boundaries I want to place with that person, and how am I reaching out to them emotionally. So how open am I emotionally to them? And I think that's ultimately one of the things that I'm really in the soil of working with is not being emotionally vulnerable, or that's not the right word, but being like, feeling like I'm seeking any sort of emotional affirmation from anybody in my life, like just really trying to find that within. And when other people like really celebrate or get a lot out of a Reiki session with me, a yoga class, they start coming routinely more. I'm always so inspired by that. That's always so great. But I know it's because they're getting something out of it. It's not something that I have to do for them. And anyway, so I feel like that's kind of in the wheelhouse of what we're talking about. But with family, I just like to keep that door open, that, my family knows that they can seek me out for Reiki treatments or whatever it is. And, one thing that's been really fulfilling though for me lately is that my mother has Parkinson's. And one of the ways I've been connecting with my parents, even after moving a few states away from them, is that we meet weekly now for yoga classes. And it's something that really helps her Parkinson's, helps reduce her pain, and a great time for me to connect with them, which wouldn't otherwise happen. So I just feel really grateful that over 15 years, I've never even sought my parents or anybody to be my client, or family members to be my clients, but nevertheless, true to say, my parents are my best client right now, because we do yoga all the time together, and it's been really helpful for them. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really lovely. Yeah, I was just thinking about, ways that we show compassion if we're thinking about the precepts. So by working on ourselves, we're showing compassion to others, because we are helping ourselves to better understand what's going on for ourselves and for them. I know when people come, to my place, like for Christmas or whatever, that, I like to cook. So really putting so much of myself into that and sharing that with others is is definitely a way that I show my love and care for them, and how much I appreciate having them in my life. And I hope that they see that, because it is a way of, it's like giving a hug to someone, so it is, thinking of ways of how we are together at these times in our lives. I think that's a really, pinpointing for yourself, how do you show your love and your care, and understanding that, I think is helpful, just in conversation with others, showing compassion in a way. I was listening to someone, I can't remember who, talking, and they were saying that there's 3 words that will create great relationships between, people. And these 3 words are tell me more. And I think that related to what you were saying, Michaela, about your dad. And that's what reminded me of that. And it's so true. Sometimes we get so internalized about our own fears. Carrie, you're talking about how we go into that space first, instead of get out of that and just be here now, and just be there for the person, and when they're telling you about their lives and their experiences, tell me more, and be there for them. And I think that's a really beautiful, compassionate way of being with each other without judging or bringing in past hurts and pains. And yeah, so those are some of the things that I thought about. And, as far as discussing the system of Reiki, I think it's really helpful. I maybe I didn't come across like that's what I was saying before. I think it's a great thing to be able to discuss. It grows your own practice by being able to discuss with others. And that's, a lot of the pleasure that I get out of being on this podcast, is that we just get to talk about subjects that come up for us each week, things that we can relate to. And before doing this podcast, there was a time where I didn't really have anyone that I could do that with. And that is a great joy for me. And certainly it is just another way of developing my own Reiki practice and my own Reiki awareness, because it makes me think about what I'm doing. And I don't get judged. We get to all grow upon each other, and that's really beautiful.
Yeah, the word that's really coming to me kind of, almost in conclusion around this conversation is openness, right? That idea of that, that tell me more, being open to the moment, right? That what is, as you're saying, Carrie, what is actually happening in this moment, and how can we lean towards connection? Yesterday, I got to spend the day with a friend of mine who were best friends in high school, and then, stayed friends for a little while after high school. And then she moved to Missouri 20 years ago. And, if it wasn't for Facebook, we would have completely lost touch with each other. But then she was in town, and it was like we just dropped right back into that same friendship. And she's not, this world is not her world. The word Reiki did not come out of my mouth one time the whole time. We didn't talk about our jobs at all, actually. And it was so lovely to just be in the moment of connection with her around whatever came forward. We talked a lot about our kids. There was a lot of parenting bonding. But it was so clear to me, one, how very different the two of us are around some very important aspects of ourselves, but how connected we were nonetheless. And then that idea of that evolution, it's so beautiful that you're doing yoga with your parents, Carrie. That just warms my heart. And similarly, I now regularly give my dad Reiki sessions. Once we got to break the ice around what actually do we believe and where's the common ground. And then there's other relationships where it's not necessary. It's just not what we have to do together. But again, I can be in my Reiki practice in those relationships, in those moments, and feel very fulfilled in them, whether or not I'm talking about Reiki. And then it's important, as you just said, Bronwen, to have cultivated spaces where we can talk about it. We can just geek out and go down that rabbit hole and just be as completely enamored with it as we want to be, because we have those kindreds. And sometimes those kindreds need to be our chosen family, not our family of origin. And so if that's the case for you, dear listener, we really welcome you and invite you to seek community around the things that you want to talk about, and continue using Reiki to help you be with the places that you have to maybe keep that a little more quiet.
Yeah. So share this podcast. Yes. And get it out there. Carrie, did you have anything you want to say to finish off?
Oh no, I'm so grateful too. I mean, I feel like this podcast has been such an incredible outlet for me to be able to just be myself, talk deeply about my experiences with Reiki. And so I'm truly grateful for each of you. And I was talking with somebody who watches our podcast, feels like it's part of our podcast family, and just talking about how we have not met in real life. I've not met Bronwen in real life. I've not met Michaela in real life yet. Honestly, this community means so much to me. And we are not family of origin. I'm not sure what you said, Michaela, but chosen family, a Reiki family. And just I'm so grateful. And so, and speaking of an expansion of our family, we have a new Instagram account, the Reiki Women Podcast. Sorry, also Reiki Healing Society on Instagram. But keep an eye if you want. I'm trying to fill up that Instagram account with some of our old lovely episodes. And so we are going to take a couple weeks off for the next for the holidays. So we won't be putting some original content out there, but we do encourage you to listen to some of our past episodes. And so I might be posting a few here and there on our channels, just some really good ones that hopefully you can drop into our conversations and get a lot out of them, and hopefully feel like you are part of that conversation that's happening. And if you do feel alone in your Reiki journey, I just so encourage you to find a Reiki friend, somebody you can speak with openly about your experiences of the practice, share yourself fully with them. As women, we so need this ability to communicate and share more of our life and our experiences with each other. So I think if you cultivate that, find that in your life, it will bring you more joy and more purpose, more meaning. So of course, that's good.
Fantastic. Happy festive seasons to everybody. And do share these podcasts so that they get out into the world, and we create a bigger family together. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye for now. Bye.